Hello and welcome to Pockenrop. In today's video I am returning to a subject I've done a couple of videos on already, which is Iron Maiden, probably my favourite metal band. And I am going to be doing a tier list of their singles. So I'm only including UK singles. I'm not going to second rank anything that was given a reissue, but I am going to include the live singles. This gives me a list of 42 singles to rank over 42 years. Before I start, I'm just going to remind you to like the video, subscribe and hit the bell to receive notifications. My ranking system covers 6 categories. At the top I've got top 200. These are songs that I think would sit in my top 200 songs of all time. Next down we have awesome, followed by excellent, good, okay, and then there is the awful tier. So let's start off chronologically with the first single from 1980. It's from the Iron Maiden album. It's Running Free. I think this is an excellent song, and fittingly it goes straight into the excellent tier. The follow-up single was Sanctuary. This was a non-album single. I think it's fine. I enjoy it. I don't think it's particularly fantastic, so I have placed it into good. The next single is Women in Uniform. This is a cover of a band called Skyhooks. The band themselves do not regard this with much, if any, affection. They felt it was fiddled with. This was released in 1980. I believe it's the last appearance of Dennis Stratton. It's not good. And it's the first single that I'm placing in the awful tier. Women in Uniform in awful. The next single is a double A side. Twilight Zone, which is really good, with Wrathchild from the Killers album. And Wrathchild is absolutely fantastic. Combined, I would be placing these into the awesome tier. Had it been Wrathchild alone as the single, it would have definitely been fitting in my top 200 because I think Wrathchild is a phenomenal song. Twilight Zone is just merely excellent. Now the final single from the Paul Di'Anno era was Purgatory from Killers. And Purgatory, it's perfectly fine. And so it sits in the OK category. We now enter the first Bruce Dickinson era, with the single release of Run to the Hills, their first top 10. It's a great song, but for me perhaps a little bit overplayed and over-familiar with it. They have over the years released it multiple times in multiple different versions, and as a result, much as I like the song, it sits in excellent. The follow-up to that, the second single and the title track from Number of the Beast, I think it's a really great song, and that's where I've placed it, into great. We then have the first contribution of Bruce as a songwriter, or at least officially recognised, and this is Flight of Icarus, the lead single from the Peace of Mind album from 1983. I love Flight of Icarus, I always have, and they have returned it to their live shows in the Legacy of the Beast tour with great effect. It's even better in its live version, and I've placed it in the awesome tier. The second single from Peace of Mind is The Trooper. And The Trooper is genuinely a very special song. Love the galloping bass line, love everything about it. It can only sit in that top 200 category. As does the first single from Power Slave, 2 Minutes to Midnight. This is actually in my top 100. Therefore, it must, if you've watched the previous videos, without any surprise, sit in the top 200 category. But here's the thing, so does the second single from Power Slave, which is Aces High. This, for a while, was my favourite Maiden song. It no longer is, but it is definitely still in my top 200 songs of all time. So that's 3 in a row that sit in my top 200. Maiden were, at this point, on fire. We now come to a couple of live singles from the Live After Death album. And much as I think Live After Death is one of the best live albums ever released, I'm not that interested in live singles generally, particularly when we've already had them as singles. And so we have Running Free live. It's okay. And straight after it, Run to the Hills live. Now, had this single actually been the song that's on the B-side and that the cover is based on, which is Phantom of the Opera, this would have been at least awesome, if not into the top 200 tier, but it's not. It's Run to the Hills, which, as I said before, overly familiar, really. And its live version of it sits in the OK tier. But we get right back on track with the first single released from Somewhere in Time, and this is in my top 100. It's Wasted Years. Has to go in the top 200, Lon, doesn't it? And its follow-up, Stranger in a Strange Land, one of the few Maiden songs that finishes with a fade-out rather than a cold end. That, I think, is also a really great song, both of which were written by Adrian Smith. This sits in the awesome tier. Now we hit my favourite Maiden album, which is Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. And the lead-off single, which was Can I Play With Madness. This hit number 3 in the UK, which at the time was by far their biggest hit single. It is the closest thing Maiden ever get to pop. This has only recently tumbled out my top 100, and therefore it's in the top 200 category. It's phenomenal stuff. The follow-up single I'm less keen on, which is The Evil That Men Do. I like the song. I like the whole album. There's nothing on the album that I dislike. But for me, this is just merely excellent. Now we come to a live single that was actually the third release, kind of, from the Seventh Son era. It's The Clairvoyant. That sits in the good category for me. It's probably the weakest single from the whole of the Seventh Son of a Seventh Son album, because the next single, which was actually from Maiden England, which was a video, is one of my all-time favourite Iron Maiden songs. It was the song that first sparked an interest when it came out in '89. It's Infinite Dreams. It's easily top 200. And this marks a transition point. It's the end of the 80s, the end of what's known as their classic era, and it's also the departure of Adrian Smith and the arrival of Yannick Gers. We enter the 90s. Now, if you've watched my album ranking video of Iron Maiden, you'll know that the 90s do not come off well. That said, they opened with the single Holy Smoke. It's a good, punchy single. I've placed it into the good tier. And its follow-up, Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter, their sole UK number 1. Partly because they released it in so many formats. It's not their best song. It's not their best single by any stretch. But it is good. Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter. I have to recognise the fact that this was a number 1 hit single. It sits in the good category. Now we reach Fear the Dark, and the lead-off single, Be Quick or Be Dead, which is kind of Iron Maiden does thrash. I'm not a huge fan of thrash metal. Be Quick or Be Dead, it's okay. And then we come to the second single from Fear the Dark, which is From Here to Eternity. This was the first studio single not to have Eddie on the cover in some way. And it's, in my opinion, it's not a good song. There were better choices of single off that album, and as a result, I've placed this into the awful category. And speaking of better choices of potential single, we then have Fear of the Dark Live from the Real Live One album. Now, Fear of the Dark is not my favourite album title song, it's one of my least favourite album title songs. But the song is kind of iconic, and they've been playing it live at pretty much every gig ever since. Fear of the Dark, for me, it's okay. The next single comes from the live album A Real Dead One, and it's Hallowed Be Thy Name Live. Hallowed Be Thy Name, the best track from Number of the Beast, is in my top 100. However, this is a live version, and it just slips it down ever so slightly into the awesome tier. Still a phenomenal song, but... So this was the last single featuring Bruce for a while. We have a new singer. It is Blaze Bayley. The album is The X Factor. It's Man on the Edge. And Man on the Edge is okay. I've got nothing against it. I enjoy it when I hear it, but I don't seek it out. The next single is from the Best of the Beast compilation. It's Virus. Virus is the first track that I would actually describe as freaking horrible. And it sits in awful. It makes From Here to Eternity and Women in Uniform look like masterpieces. Virus is horrible. As is the next pick, Angel and the Gambler from Virtual 11. The only thing I can say good about the single is that it's shorter than the album version. Angel and the Gambler is a crap song, and it can only sit in awful. Especially when you consider that there was a better single on Virtual 11, and that's Future Real. Now, Future Real is phenomenal. I adore Future Real. It's one of my all-time favourite Maiden tracks, and it's top 200. I love Future Real. This should have been the lead single. So this period now draws to an end. The 90s, not a good time, but they bring Bruce and Adrian back, become a six-piece for the first time, and the first release from the six-piece version of Iron Maiden is Wicker Man. Wicker Man is a great single. It sits in awesome for me. The follow-up is sometimes described as Iron Maiden's weirdest single. It's Out of the Silent Planet. Again, there was better material that could have made a single from Brave New World. I'm placing it in the OK category. The next single is from the Rock in Rio video, I think. It's Run to the Hills Live. I don't need another version of Run to the Hills Live in my life. This is going to sit, I'm afraid, just purely for the fact that this is the third time they've released it. It's going to sit in awful. The next single coming from Dance of Death, the lead single from that is Wildest Dreams. It's okay. It's almost workaday Maiden for me. Don't hate it, don't dislike it. It's okay. But the second single, which is again probably should have been the lead-off single, would have got higher in the charts, is Rainmaker. Now, Rainmaker I think is terrific, and I'm placing it in the awesome category. We now have another live single, and there is no different cover to this than there is for the original version that came out in 1983. It's The Trooper Live. I'd rather listen to the studio version. But given the phenomenal quality of the single, I can only really put it into OK. The next single was Reincarnation of Benjamin Brieg from Matter of Life and Death. This is a long old single, so much so that by then chart rules had changed and it wasn't allowed to be classed as eligible for the singles chart, so it didn't chart. I find Reincarnation of Benjamin Brieg somewhat forgettable. I'm placing that in the OK category. The follow-up single to that was Different World. Different World is marginally better. It's a proper single. I'm placing that into the great category. Now we reach the sole single release from the Final Frontier, and it's Eldorado. I like Eldorado. I'm placing that into the great category. And the first single release from Book of Souls came out in 2015. This is Speed of Light. Speed of Light I think is terrific. I think it's a really, really good single. The video is fantastic. Go and watch that on YouTube if you haven't, but finish watching this first. Speed of Light sits in the awesome category for me. Then we have a Record Store Day single, which is really quite hard to find. It's a 12-inch, because it's 18 minutes long. It's Empire of the Clouds. I like Empire of the Clouds a lot, but for me, it's not really a single. It's going to sit in the great category. And now we reach the last two singles from the most recent album, Senjutsu, and we have Writing on the Wall. I think Writing on the Wall is a really, really great song. I'm placing that in the excellent category because there's one ever so slightly better, and that's Stratego. Stratego is a proper Maiden single. Full pelt, really quite fast. Sits in the awesome category. So that completes my tier list ranking of the 42 Iron Maiden singles. Let me know in the comments below what you think of it. What do you think should have gone in that top 200 level? What should have gone in the awful category? Am I being a little bit unfair to some of the live singles? Should they be higher? Let me know. I'll be back in a week with another video. But until then, remember to like, hit the subscribe button, ring the bell for notifications, and thanks for watching.